Okay.
This will be the beginning, and I'll say, good afternoon. I have the pleasure of talking to Susan Mills, also known as Abigail Mills. Is that correct? You have
That's my legal name.
two names, but have you used both of them in show business?
No. The Abigail belongs in my teaching career. My Equity and my Screen Actors Guild name is different. The Susan Mills comes from the fact that my middle name is Susan and my married name is Mills. And I use that name when I work non-equity here in Florida.
Okay,
My friends call me Susan because it happens to be my favorite name of my two names.
okay.
I was born Roberta Susan Lean, Lean. And so my equity name and my Screen Actors Guild name is Roberta Lean. When I recorded with 20th Century Fox Records, it was Roberta Lean.
Let's go back to the very beginning.
Okay.
When did your show business connection start? What age?
I guess I have to say about 13. I was on a children's show in Philadelphia called the Horn and Hardart Children's Hour.
Yes, I've interviewed a couple of people who came through that show.
Now there was the show came out of Philadelphia and the other one came out of New York. I think Bernadette Peters was on the one in New York. But I was on the one in Philadelphia with Patty Mariano and Jackie Mayrow, who was the original Baby June and Gypsy. And there was also another show that came out of Philadelphia, and it was a little bit before my time, and that was called The Magic Lady. And Eddie Fisher was on that show with Fabian and some of the South Philadelphia people. And Eddie Fisher, I did say Eddie Fisher.
So you just heard,
and
you heard
Don
the program
Potter.
on the radio, and did you say to your mother, Mommy, I want to be, or father, I want to be in that show?
I had heard it, I always heard it on the radio, but then later on television. And from the time I was about 8 years old, I wanted to do it. But it wasn't until I was 13 that I got a chance to audition, and I got in. And I was part of the opening waitress chorus because, it was Horn and Hardart were the people who sponsored it. So I was a Horn and Hardart waitress in the beginning, our little song we sang. And then I was in all the group scenes too. And so it started at 13. And aside from that, I didn't do very much in Philadelphia till I went to New York when I was 19. And when
all by yourself? You just...
Yeah. Well, my parents drove me there, but yeah, I was all alone.
Did you
Actually,
did you go to an all-girls residence? Or
yes, I did. Yes, I did. I had a friend with whom I went to high school, and she had studied with Nico Charisse, who was Sid Charisse's brother in California. And we kept tabs with each other. And she was already in New York at the Laura Spelman residence. And that was a subsidiary of the YWCA.
But
it was
you recall what it would have cost to stay?
Yeah, I do. It was $127 a month.
Okay.
With 2 meals. And
so you went,
so
did you audition?
She's the one who opened the doors there. And I went there and I went to live there. And I started out ushering at all the Broadway shows. I was an usher.
But you did not audition for roles in Broadway?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, as I said, I went there in 1960. I was 19. And I started auditioning, but it was a blind kind of thing because I didn't know very much about where I was in the milieu, which I was. I didn't know about auditioning, and I didn't know about the actual business of the theater in New York when it came to an artist.
But there were the
As
two
I-
publications. They had Backstage and Show Business, right?
Yes.
Your girlfriend probably told you about those, and you looked
Oh,
through them?
yeah. Early on, I knew about them. And of course, I would peruse them constantly. But at that point, I didn't know about type, and I didn't know how to prepare myself to be seen as advantageously as I could have. So I used to go for all the auditions. Now, at that time, I was very tiny. I mean, I'm still tiny, but I was a very young looking person. So I didn't look 20 years old. I looked more like 15 or 16, and went for roles for people who were supposed to look 20 or 25. So I didn't have a lot of success until I auditioned for a show called Go Fight City Hall, and it was Yiddish theater. And the show was going to be done on West 47th Street, but it was on Broadway, but it was not considered a Broadway show. And I got the part of the sister to Bruce Adler, who, as we all know, the marvelous character man. And the mother and father in the show were Henrietta Jacobson, a revered star of the Yiddish theater, and Irving Jacobson, who played my father. And of course, he was the original Sancho Panza in Man of La Mancha. And that was a wonderful show. I stayed with that till the end. It only ran, I think, about 3 or 4 months.
Do you recall what kind of salary you got for that?
I think I probably got about $75 a week. And
you were able to survive. That was a livable wage. You had your $120 room charge, and I
right.
guess food you ate inexpensively. You did not.
Oh, well, I ate the 2 meals a day that were offered, but on a Saturday and Sunday when they didn't have a dinner, you'd have to eat lunch. I would make a little sandwich or something from what I was eating, and eat it in the room for my supper. But sometimes my grandmother would send me a check for $5. And so I had a little money to go to a cafeteria and get a meal. I didn't starve, but I didn't have a lot of money. And
are you on the cast album? I have an LP of Go Fight City Hall. Are you singing on that?
Well, I sang in the show, and if I don't remember going to a studio and recording it. And
well, look, maybe I can send you the recording, and we can.
I would love to. I would love it. Yes, if they took that, if they taped it within the context of our doing the show, then I was on it. If they did a separate
in
recording,
those days they didn't do that. That was more complicated. They went into a studio, so.
Well, if they did,
you were in it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But then you must be on there unless they recorded it afterwards or something without.
It's possible.
All the people.
They never told me about it.
There was a Jewish label on Long Island, and they recorded Molly Pecan, and everything was Jewish on this label.
Yeah.
And they put it out in the 60s, but I don't know exactly when in the 60s.
Yeah, well, that's when I did it. I think I did it in 62. But as I said, I did not record the cast album, so they probably had somebody else come in. And this is the first I'm hearing about it. I never knew that.
Okay. So how long were you in that?
Till the end. And as I said, I think it ran about 3 months.
And then were you continually auditioning while you were in the show?
Constantly auditioning. But by then I had gotten a job as a cashier at a coffee shop on Broadway, right across from Phil Black, right across from the Rivoli Theater. And the owner of the coffee shop was always looking to help out young actors like myself. And he brought in one of the people that used to eat there all the time. He told him about me, and the man that he was a really Damon Runyon character, kind of with stogie in his mouth and gruff voice. And he said, "Kid, can you sing?" I said, "Yeah, I can sing." So he brought me up to the Brill building in an office there, and with a piano player. And he explained to me that the girl who had done Bobby's Girl, nice girl from Long Island, really didn't want to do record hops or any of the PR that you had to do for recording. And they were looking for somebody to replace her. So I sang Lipstick on Your Collar of that genre. And he got me a 4-record contract with 20th Century Fox Records. And if you pull it up on Google, you can hear it. And it's called Thank You. And it didn't sell, but I did the record hops. That was nice. It was a good experience in my life. And and it was after that, through my ushering, that I was standing at the back of the theater when the stage manager came to me during the Deputy, David Carradine. And he said to me, "Would you like to hop into the show?" Of course, I practically groveled at his feet at that point.
Well, what show is this?
This was called The Deputy with David Carradine.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, the whole point was that it was a extra part. It did not have lines. I had one scene with David Carradine where he walked me into a place for hiding, as the Jews were, the Jewish children were hidden during the Holocaust. And I fit the wardrobe. It was basic as that. I fit the wardrobe. So I was in the Deputy, I think, for about 6 months. I think until it closed. It was a tail end. And then it was after that that I auditioned and auditioned. And of course, by this time, it took about 3 years before I realized who I was in the theater and what I would have to do to make myself a selling piece, because we're all commodity in that sense. So I fashioned myself in the roles that I knew I could do and auditioned for them. And then finally, as I was ushering one day at, I think it was Spartacus, or it might have been The Sound of Music at the Rivoli Theater, there was another girl who lived at the Y with me, and she was in a show called This Was Burlesque. She played the chubby, gum-chewing, blonde, dopey character. And she wanted to leave the show. And being very close with Anne Corrio, who was the star, she knew it would be a little difficult to pull herself away, both in her eyes and in Anne's eyes. So she said, "Would you like to do it?" And I was exactly like she was, short and cutesy and a little chubby. And so she revved me up on all the parts, all the dance numbers, the singing, everything. And then she presented me to Anne, told her she was leaving. And she said, "But I have a replacement." And I was ready. And Anne said, "Yep, she'll be fine." So I went into the show in September of 1965. And
where is it playing at this point?
It was down at the Casino East. But
On 12th and 2nd Avenue?
Exactly.
They kept
But
changing the name of the theater, changed names
Yeah.
many times.
Yes, it was the Phoenix too.
Right.
And at the end of the run was coming to an end because they were going out on the road on a national tour. So she left then, and I started the national tour in Wallingford in Connecticut. Or no, Framingham, Connecticut. I played it there first, and was
So
with
these are
the
the
show.
tents, you were playing tent theaters?
Yep. And some big old vaudeville houses too,
So all
depending
over
on
the
where we
country,
were.
yeah? Did you go all over the country? Did you go to
Yes,
the
went
coast and
all the
the
way over to
Midwest?
all the way over to California, all the way up to Canada, Toronto, down to Puerto Rico. So yeah, we played
What-
all over the
What do you
country.
think you were paid for this? What do you think your
I
pay would have
think
been?
I was paid about $175,
Did
which,
you have an
know,
agent? Did you have an agent?
no, I did not have an agent, and it was not equity, it was AFTRA.
Ah,
And so I was in the show in 65, and I did all my scenes with the top banana, the star of the show, who was Steve Mills. I married him in 66, and I immediately stepped into 1935. Because Steve lived, his whole countenance was of all the old days. I mean, he lived in the present, but he was surrounded by the past. And of course, he had gone into the industry when he was 14 years old, which it was around 1910. And I was married to him for 11 years until he had us. I was married to him for 22 years, but the first 11 years we were on the show, and he did 70 Girls 70. He did the comedy of Steve Mills for CBS for Camera 3. And I did The Guiding Light. And this was like in between. We were out in Las Vegas with the show. And it was there that later on, he was asked to do a Minsky show at the Circus.
but
So
had he done burlesque before Anne Corrio?
yes, he was in 1910, he started singing on street corners as a young boy with Benny Rubin and some of those early people. He then went on to be a candy butcher in around 1925, and at the burlesque houses where he learned the craft. And then gradually he started getting jobs on the shows and getting hired straight through. So he started when he was, I'm going to say 20 years old, on or around that time, in burlesque, until he became a top banana. And Billy Minsky was the one who coined that phrase with him when he went down to the National Winter Garden, which the top part of the National Winter Garden was the burlesque, where the bottom part was the National Winter Garden was the Yiddish theater. So
Did he appear with Gypsy Rose Lee or people of that stature?
He never. Yeah, well, Anne Corrio was the star of our show, and she, with Gypsy Rose Lee and Hinda Wasu, were the top 3 strippers in New York. Okay, so
when do you think she got started? What year do you think she got started?
She came into the up in Harlem with Steve, which became the Cotton Club. And she was 16 years old. So that had to be in the 20s. And I was married to Steve all this time. When we were married 11 years, he had a stroke. He lost his speech. And for the last 11 years of his life, we lived in Rhode Island, in a big house that he had bought in 1947. And I just took care of him till the end of his life, and he died in my arms. And he was 94.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything you remember about 70 Girls? Because that's a
Sure.
favorite musical of some people.
Oh, yeah. 70 Girls 70 was his last Broadway show. And of course, in the show were Millie Natwick and Hans Conried, a whole bunch of other people. As a matter of fact, I have a picture here of them doing, let's see if I can, how can that come through?
Can you back it up a little? I think it's too close. Okay,
Wait a minute.
okay. Do you recall what he sang in 70 Girls?
Yeah. Now this is better.
That's good. That's good.
That's Marjorie, I forgot her last name, and Steve and Hans Conried and Lucy Lancaster in the back and Sally Mays in the middle. And the man in the back there was just like Will Abel. He was originally a contortionist. Lovely man. And that was when they made the cast album.
So you were there for the entire day of the recording?
No, I was not there for the recording. No, I didn't go to the recording. I was there for rehearsals to watch them. They were just a wonderful bunch. Fred Ebb and John Kander were lovely, lovely people. John still is a lovely person.
Yes.
And Fred Ebb, lovely. As Steve used to say that at rehearsals that, you know, he had long hair, as you can see. And he used to say that Millie Natwick would run her fingers through his hair and say, "Is this your real hair?" She was a very funny, lovely person. She's a lovely, lovely person. Here's a picture of Steve.
Okay.
And
You still have all his memorabilia?
no, I don't. Here he is.
Okay.
No, all his memorabilia and his scenes and all of that went to the Boston Library.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me. In his collection. I have some of the tangible memorabilia, the pipe he used to smoke, the hat he used to wear, which I will donate back to his collection, which is next to the Fred Allen collection in Boston. He was a Boston boy. And so it went back to Boston where he wanted it.
Did you go to Florida shortly after he died?
He died in 88, and my mother died in 89. I stayed in Florida for just a little bit, a few months, and then I went back to Rhode Island because I had that big house. And I resumed my teaching there. I was teaching in the public schools there. And after 11 years of that, in 2002, I moved down here to Florida.
So for about 10 years, you were teaching and not acting at all?
For the 11 years, no. For the 11 years that he was sick, when he had the stroke, we were still in Rhode Island. And I did What the Butler Saw there, and my favorite year. And I was teaching, doing community theater. It's considered community theater. After he passed and I moved down here, I did some equity theater, but not a lot here in Florida. And I naturally had forays into New York since then. I was there last March. And
Just before the pandemic?
yeah, right when they closed the theaters.
Oh.
And so I don't know what's going to happen now. I like to get back onto Broadway. And the teaching is few and far between now because the colleges are doing very poorly. So it could very well be that I get to teach some more. Of course, I do watercolor and I read a lot and write. So a lot of things that I do here, but I'd like to get back into New York and do some good theater because see now, knowing what I know as far as what I am as a performer, I am an Estelle Getty, kind of Eve Arden type of sarcastic, ethnic character with a heart of gold, that kind of role. My voice is still strong. I can still dance. You know, I'm still very fit, thank God. So as I say, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know, Bruce.
What are the last shows you saw in New York City?
I saw Mrs. Doubtfire in the previews.
That opened to very mixed reviews. People are so critical about the fact he's lying and he's conceiving these. Years ago, that would have been perfectly fine. I mean, when Robin Williams did the movie, they didn't complain about that. But
well, see, of course, you know, the premise of that whole thing was taken from the film, which got wonderful reviews. The best part of it was Robin Williams, but I have to tell you that when Rob McClure, who is brilliant, comes on that stage, you don't think of Robin Williams. He is multifaceted in his comedy. If he had been around in the days of the real Burlesque, he would have been a top banana. Oh. He is very, very funny and very clever.
He played Chaplin. You didn't see it.
He did.
See that show, did you?
No, I didn't see that. But Rob is really good, really, really good. And I on Instagram, I sent him a message saying, "Have you been around Burlesque? You would have been a top banana." But that's the last show I saw. I was supposed to see 6 on the opening night, but the shows all Broadway closed. But the other day I saw West Side Story, which was partially produced. We know that Rita Moreno was the executive producer, but Kevin McCullum produced Doubtfire and 6, and produced in part West Side Story. And I saw that the other day, and I think it's brilliant. I don't think it's fair to compare. You know, they all stand alone, all the productions, the original in New York and the last film version. But this one is so inventive and expanded. Well, of course, you can do so much more with a medium of film than you can on the legitimate theater. But to see the music blend with the choreography by Justin Peck is brilliant. He did, and it was all his choreography was based on Jerome Robbins, but it wasn't the same. It was based on it, so it was embellished. It was changed slightly. And of course, he did all those big street scenes with all the extras, all the people. You really got the whole ambiance of what New York was like at that particular time, and San Juan Hill, which was Puerto Rican area, which, as you know, later became Lincoln Center. But you saw what they did with the old
they
film.
recreated that.
Yeah, they did.
New Jersey, they built what you see as the ruins.
Yeah. I thought I read that they used file film from
Yeah.
the old, but the actual set itself was in New Jersey, where they do the scenes, and you see the people going up to the back stairways of the tenements. So I mean, it was really very true to life, and they used Puerto Rican actors, which was wonderful. Just it was, and the two leads, a girl named Rachel. What is her last name?
Impressive. She was a junior in
Yeah.
school, and she said, "Can I finish doing Shrek for my high school?" And Steven Spielberg said, "Yes, and I'll come and see you." Steven
Yeah.
Spielberg came to New Jersey to see her in a high school show.
Oh, she was
I think,
wonderful. And the cinematography is so great because you see, it's just shot beautifully. Excuse me. She's just a beautiful little girl and a wonderful singing voice. A lot of the people, they compare. So I think it's wrong to compare Larry Kurt with the boy who did Tony. I thought he was beautiful. And of course, Rita Moreno played the shopkeeper's wife, and she sings somewhere. I'm glad she does.
There's been a little criticism from some people because Tony and Maria normally sang that song. How do you feel about that?
I'm glad they gave it to Rita to do, because her singing it was from a different vantage. And you saw a flashback of her early years being married to the man. And when she says somewhere there'll be a place for us, she's talking about her generation. And, the politics and the social structure of that particular time. It's sad when you see Tony get shot, but it follows along the lines of the Romeo and Juliet, where she thinks he's dead. He kills himself, or rather he's killed, but she thinks she doesn't know, and she kills herself at the end.
He wants to be dead because he thinks she is dead.
Yeah.
Only to find out.
Yeah.
That is a nice twist. I kind of like that.
Yeah. It was just beautifully done.
I said that there's only 5 minutes worth of dialogue from the original screenplay or Broadway show. Everything else is telling the same basic story, but in different words.
Yes.
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought you'd rewrite 95%, but that's what they did.
Well, in Officer Krupke, they didn't do it at the drugstore.
Right.
And, they did it in the police station where they were being questioned about the rumble. But that was beautifully staged and directed, beautifully done. Spielberg is just wonderful.
I'm fairly good friends with Brian D.R.C. James, who played Officer Krupke.
You are?
Yes.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, he's been on 3 or 4 of my recordings.
Yes.
And I even, there was a famous flop called Kelly by Mou Charlap and Eddie Lawrence.
Yes, yes.
And years later, they did it at the York Theater, and I did a recording. And for the recording, there was one number, and I said, I want to hear everybody who comes in, because we recorded a few people at a time, because it was a small recording studio. So every time men came in, it was always a man song. It's like an old-fashioned barroom song. Everyone here loves Kelly. And so everybody sang.
Now,
so
Anita Gillette was in that too, wasn't she?
She was in the original one.
Yeah.
And I wanted her to be on the recording. Eddie Lawrence said, oh no, she was against me in the show. So he wouldn't let her on the recording. But her big song in that show was I Never Go There Anymore. And I said, can I hear you singing it? Because there's no live recording. Going back that far, usually somebody had a tape recorder. There was not a tape recording of that. And she, without looking at music or anything like that, she sang it from, I said, when did you last sing that? She said 1964. This
Oh,
was like
wow.
5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But she didn't. Well, I said, oh, I definitely want to hear your rendition of that. And then my piano player, who I'm not happy with, I told her, oh, Bruce has changed his mind, doesn't want you to sing that song, which is a total lie, you know. So she said, oh, I'm now not prepared to do it. So I never did record her doing that song. And
Mhm.
I lived in a building with Rita Moreno from 1966 to 1969
Uh-huh.
called the River Bend on 87th and York Avenue. We had a swimming, I moved into that building because they had a swimming pool on the roof. And I thought, I'm home during the daytime at a business selling baseball cards. And I did that 9 to 5, you know.
Hmm.
So I said, I could take time off and I could swim. And there'll be a few housewives, you know, no, at that point, you know. But the first year they did it, there was a water shortage. So they said, sorry, we can't
Oh.
get water.
Uh-huh.
The second year there was water, but originally there had been a dome proposed because it was very near the smokestack where all the garbage was burned, you know,
Uh-huh.
and the soot came and occasionally went into the pool. So that was not a good situation. But I've been in Connecticut and I swim at the Y, and they have no burning refuse to
Hmm.
avoid in the pool. You know. When I came to New York, I stayed in the area where Lincoln Center was being built.
Oh, really?
I thought I would come to New York and that within a week or two I would find an apartment. But I was told I should not pay more than 25% of my salary, which is $500.
Hmm.
In fact, I was looking for under 100,
Oh, gee.
and it was not that easy.
Yeah.
And instead of spending a week or two, I was at this hotel, which is torn down, now, uh, until November. It took me
Hmm.
until late October to find a brownstone on East 78th Street. And, so I
Uh-huh.
moved there and started started
You
doing
know,
my.
I
I
was going to
started.
say, you're talking about Kelly, and I have an interesting little anecdote about
Right.
Moose Charlap.
Ah,
Now, Moose was married to Sandy Stewart.
right.
Okay. Now, Sandy Stewart's father and my father were bowling buddies in Philadelphia.
I think Sandy was on the Hornenhauer.
Yeah, but way before I was. And so my father, when I went to New York, I mean, my parents had trepidation of my being in New York alone, and as any parent would. And so he said to Saul, who was Sandy's father, do you think that Roberta can call Sandy and maybe give her a few tips? And so Saul asked Sandy, and Sandy said, fine. So he gave me her phone number, and I called her up on the phone. And we started talking, and she said, how old are you? And I was about 20 at the time. I said, I'm 20. She said, oh my God, from the way your father spoke, I thought you were 12. Because my father didn't know how adequate I actually was. He was afraid for me. And so she felt that I had pretty much, have it on the ball. Anyway, she was very nice to me, and her daughter, Catherine, had just been born, I think. And her son, of course, as you know who he is,
Well, I
Billy.
have done an interview with Bill.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm not a fan of jazz, but he does something special, and almost always he plays a melody. Too many jazz people, the jazz people are listening to this, play the melody at least some of the time. If you want to play your own music, don't call it All the Things You Are or My Favorite Things. If you're playing the melody, if you're playing a famous person's melody that people know, play the melody. Bill, except Thelonious Monk doesn't have any melody, so
Mhm.
you can do anything you want with Thelonious Monk.
Yeah, I like Billy's music. But anyway, Sandy was very nice to me. And that was the one and only time I ever got to speak to her.
Did you have another Moose Charlotte story or just that?
That's the only Moose Charlotte story I have.
She was younger than Moose. Moose was 15, 20 years older than she was.
Oh, really?
And they were rehearsing this in a rehearsal hall. The different levels, and he heard her rehearsing. And he said, at this point, he's working on Peter Pan. And he said, I have a new musical. I'd like you to sing some of the songs from my new musical. And she's like 12 years old or something like that. And she does it. And he said, I love that. So she made some other recording. She did not record anything from Peter Pan, but she made some demos of other things. And through her career, she has premiered an awful lot of music on demos, because they almost never take anybody from the cast, because you have to pay the cast.
Yeah.
You have to pay the entire cast.
Yeah.
To have one person. So Steve, if there is a demo of 70 Girls, Steve is not on the demo. He's on the cast album. Now, on the demo, it's Kander and Ebbs.
Now let me just tell you about the demo. Because all of the people, were older people. And so
everyone was 70 except for the young boy. Only the young boy was.
No, Tommy Breslin. Yeah, he was the only one. And John and Fred made a demo of the songs with just the piano, singing at the piano, nothing else, just the two of them.
Right.
And he sent the records. They were LPs.
Yep. Big
records to all the cast. And I have the set now with me. And it's a collector's item.
I made it into a CD, so it's.
I would like to have it made into a CD. I probably should.
I would gladly send you that. So we'll talk off air, and I'll get the address that I can mail that to you.
Especially the one of Go Fight City Hall. But let me ask you something. On the cover itself, on the actual. What do you call it? Like the envelope of the record.
There wasn't any picture. Sometimes there's a logo for the show. It just says 70 Girls.
No, not 70 Girls. I'm talking about Go Fight City Hall.
It's like red and orange, and
does
it's just the title. It's just the title.
Does it have a cast listing?
I'm sure on the back.
Yeah.
I'm sure it does, but.
Well, can you look at it?
Well, I can't now, but I will after.
Yeah, because I want to know.
My daughter's in charge of all the material. She has everything.
I'd like to know who sang the part of Flora, which was my part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see theater at all in Florida?
Yeah, I see when the national companies come into the Strash Center, which is in Tampa. I see the national companies, yeah.
Are some of them non-equity?
Oh, no, they're equity. National companies are equity.
But sometimes I think it's a shame to send out a show non-equity and they charge. I mean, you're non-equity. Non-equity has its place, but if you're asking people to pay hundreds of dollars, I think they deserve a little more seasoned performers.
Well, I'll tell you something now. This is what I think about that. As far as the shows that come into our big theater in Tampa, the national companies are all equity houses, equity casts, because they're cast in New York. That's the first thing. If you have a show that is non-equity, which is cast in New York too, I wouldn't go along to say that they aren't seasoned performers, because what it is if they're determined to go non-equity and they do it, if an equity performer, as you know, is not allowed to do a non-equity show. But if an equity person or a non-equity person has a lot of experience and is seasoned, but wants to work and wants to forego that whole thing and says, yes, I'll do the non-equity show. I mean, that's his personal choice.
Yes,
but
yes.
There's no connotation there that he's not seasoned. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but do you go to non-equity, you think, sometimes?
Well, I usually go to the shows at the Straz. I don't remember ever seeing something that was non-equity there.
What other theaters are there? What other big cities are near Tampa? I don't know my geography well.
Well, Tampa is our big city here, and that's where I live in that part.
Miami is way far away.
Oh, yes, it's on the other coast,
Okay.
and it's down south.
You ever
Yeah,
gone to Miami?
I don't go to Miami, no, not at all. If you can picture Florida, I'm at the midway part of Florida, but on the west coast.
Miami's at the boot, bottom of Florida.
No, the middle part.
Ah.
But on the west coast, and I'm just south of Tampa. I'm about 40 minutes south of Tampa. But Miami's on the east coast and all the way down the bottom.
I have a good friend in Kissimmee.
Oh, that's north.
How far is that from you?
Oh, Kissimmee is maybe
Hour.
a couple hours.
Couple hours, yeah.
And Kissimmee is more central Florida, but north central. It's like around the Orlando area. And then if you go further west, you go to Weeki Wachee. And, some of those places.
Do you think you've worked in almost every major city?
No, I've worked only in St. Petersburg.
No, I'm talking about around the country. Like
Oh.
Chicago,
The
Los
show
Angeles.
played Chicago and Philadelphia, Boston, played St. Petersburg, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Denver, Los Angeles, Colorado, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington. We didn't play North Dakota or South Dakota. We played Kansas City, Kansas. Or was it Missouri? No, it was Kansas.
This is basically a bus tour?
No, we flew. There was a truck that followed, that took all the scenery around.
Right.
But when we played the Cape, we just went in our cars. The Hyannis, in Connecticut, the Starleton in Massachusetts. We never played Vermont, and we never played New Hampshire. And we did not play Maine, but we did play Massachusetts and Connecticut.
Did you ever play Westport? Westport is right near me.
The Connecticut? Or no, neither Connecticut nor Massachusetts, no.
No, I
I mean,
have.
Paul Newman's.
And I think after this was Burlesque, they got together. It was something. They all were people who had performed in 1936. When they were considerably younger. This is in the 90s, late 80s, 90s. So something like the big show of 1936. So they had Anne Corrio was another time they had Sally Rand. She did her
When was this?
late 80s, early 90s.
Because she died in 99.
I know that this is definitely before 99.
Yeah.
And they toured that like to the Cape and things like that. So Westport
I didn't know about that. I didn't know that she did that show.
I mean,
I
it
thought
was a summer. It was probably June through September or something like that.
was it just burlesque people or was it vaudeville?
No. Like an Ed Sullivan kind of thing. They probably had a dog act.
Oh, like a vaudeville show.
Yes.
Yeah. See, the thing about burlesque is that you could put a burlesque scene in a vaudeville show, but you couldn't put a vaudeville act in a burlesque show.
Right.
I mean, you wouldn't put a dog act or a child act or, you would have a singer, but that singer would be part of the context of the burlesque. And remember that in early burlesque, or even in its heyday, there were such things called wheels, and it was like a circuit, and there were about 3 or 4 of them. And comics would be sign a contract for 13 or 18 or 25 weeks, and they would stay on that circuit. There was also a thing called a burlesque book show, where there would be an actual book, a whole regular script book, but it would all be burlesque humor. One of them was called Miss Tabasco, and Steve was in that at the old Columbia Theater, which was right next to the Palace Theater right across the street. And that was part of the Columbia Wheel. Now there's a book now that has been written by a man named Andy Davis, and it's called Burlesque, Steve Mills Burlesque Scenes from the Steve Mills Collection. And it's being published by the Minnesota University Press, and it's going to come out next year. And I have the manuscript, and it talks all about Steve's life and his life, not only as a young person, but his life in the theater. And all the scenes. Now, it's important to realize that every burlesque scene that you ever saw belonged to everybody. It was public domain because a comic would go into a theater and see a scene and rewrite it in certain parts so it became his version. And so every single scene that you ever saw was a scene that everybody did. There are a couple of scenes that were actually written, and you can see their ownership. Joey Faye did write Flugel Street. But for the most part, and almost entirely, every scene was done by everyone. And that includes Who's On First. And Abbott Costello did not write it. And that, you have to set the record straight. And there have been books written that have already stated this, because Steve was doing that scene 20 years before they met. He did it in 1924, and I have the Variety review that says Steve Mills was wonderful in the baseball scene.
Oh.
Bud Abbott did it with his wife in the 20s in vaudeville. So, I mean, there was a point at which Kevin McCullum was doing a play on Broadway called Hand to God. And Chris Costello decided that she wanted to sue him because in the script itself, the man holding the hand puppet did a little part of Who's On First. And she was suing him and saying that was her father's scene. And when the Tony Committee saw this, they did not go ahead with the nomination. And when I read this, I called Kevin. I didn't even know where he was, but I managed to get his phone number, and I called him and said, "Excuse me, she can't sue you because," and I told him why. So Andy Davis, who had just written a book on burlesque comics, had a lot of material on it. And between him and myself, we got together all the burlesque material that was relevant to Who's On First. And we sent it to Kevin's lawyer, and the case was thrown out. And the judge said, this case doesn't get to first base. And
the comedian too.
Yeah, he went along with it, and Chris never could sue him because, you know, the scene was done for 100 years. And the interesting little piece that goes with it is when Bud and Lou went to play the London Palladium in 1951, I believe it was. They couldn't do the baseball scene because cricket is their national pastime. So what they did was instead of with a baseball scene, they did it with an orchestra. And that was Steve's scene. His scene was who plays first sax. He did it with a little orchestra or a band. And they used that. If she's going to sue anybody, then I could sue posthumously. Because, I mean, but the thing is, Steve didn't own it in the sense that he might have been his version of Who's On First, which goes all the way back to the 1800s with Weber and Fields. I mean, he did his version.
Is there any recording of Steve's version?
I have what he did in the HBO that we did of the show. And what I have of his doing Pack in the Trunk, which is another scene. Actually, he was the one who had first done it, but then it's been done, as I said, by many other comics.
So what is this HBO show?
It's called This Was Burlesque. It was they came to Northampton, Massachusetts at the Smith College campus, and they filmed it at this theater. And I have that DVD.
Is this available anywhere to buy or watch?
I don't know, but how about if I get it done for you and I send it out to you?
Okay, I appreciate that.
You might message to me your address where I can send it.
Okay.
But anyway, so Kevin since has taken Hand to God to London, and everything is good. Unfortunately, Chris is just a little short-sighted because she says that was his legacy, but I beg to differ because his legacy is the same as Steve's, that they entertained people, they made people laugh, and it was a source of entertainment. I mean, that's the legacy all of us give. I mean, even if it's a drama and a deep play, you're taking people out of their life for a half an hour or an hour or so, and you're bringing them to another realm which you have invented or created as an actor.
As far as Gypsy goes, is there any truth to I mean, only a lot of it is a fable. It's called a fable, right? So Arthur Loren said, you know, I'm not interested in telling the truth. I want to tell a fable.
Well, I think the whole thing is that Gypsy, first of all, wrote her autobiography. And June Hovik, the sister, they both contributed the information. So, excuse me, Arthur Lawrence had viable, credible material to work with. But, you know.
Do you believe that Gypsy was booked into a burlesque house and they needed her to go on?
Yes.
That is a true story.
Yes, because Steve was there when that happened. It was Mrs. Wilner's burlesque house down near, all the way down 14th Street. They had a theater. It was Mrs. Wilner's house.
This is in New York City.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were booked into that. And that is true. But so, I mean, to the fable, it's when you talk about author's license, I mean, I can tell a story to you and I can embellish it in some way, whereas the basis of the story is there. But my interpretation of it just doesn't change it, but it embellishes it, makes it a little different. And it's the same way with Gypsy.
But she was making costumes for the other strippers. You think that was true?
Yeah, I'm sure she did. Because don't forget, they made their own costumes and Gypsy did that. Louise did that
Right.
in their own troupe. It was not a fun existence. And, one day as I got onto the crosstown bus, June was sitting right there and I sat next to her and I started to talk to her. And she looked at me and she said, we're all, what did she say? Not clowns, but meaning that even though we were funny people, that we were not completely sane to go into the industry. She was very nice, very sweet. And that was the only time I ever met her. Gypsy came to see our show and I saw her backstage, but I never met her. However, Ethel Merman was a very close friend of Anne's. And when we were playing at the Tropicoro room, which Anne later changed to the Tropicorio room at the El San Juan Hotel, St. Martin's was the little island down from Puerto Rico. And one day Ethel came up and sat down. There was this big, nice reception area. And she sat there and all of us kind of like sat around her like she was a queen, which we all thought that she was a queen, at least I did. And we were all asking questions. And Anne said, that I asked some question and Anne said, oh, you don't need to ask her that question. And Ethel said, it's all right. You know how she used to talk. It's all right. Leave her alone. She's okay. She's talked that way too. But I spoke to her.
Originally, there was a musical written by Dietz and Schwartz, Sadie Thompson.
Yeah.
The original star was Ethel Merman. And Ethel, doing rehearsals, Ethel had a boyfriend. And she said, I want to sing some of my boyfriend's lyrics. Now, Dietz and Schwartz are not going to let an amateur songwriter, and words were stated, and she left the show.
Oh.
And June took over the show. She replaced her in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And they came to New York. And again, years later, the early 1999 or something like that, she did an evening at the White Barn Theater, which now, at that point, the White Barn didn't pay some kind of a license thing to have scripted things.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, I can't do the dialogue, have people in the show do the dialogue, but I can tell you the basic story. The actors can. So they did, and she had playing Sadie Thompson. She did one song that she had originally sung. And they had a woman, I think Anne Russell, Anne Russell.
Yeah, she was English,
right?
Wasn't she?
That's someone else. There's a Australian.
Oh,
with that name too. But this is anyway. But she was always an understudy. Almost never got to go on. Like for Merman, no one ever goes on for Ethel Merman. So wasting your time to be Ethel Merman anyway. So I wanted to do a recording of this. So I did not want the woman who played understudies all the time. So I talked to the people at the White Barn, and they said that Melissa Errico and some other well-known singer had been interested in doing it, but couldn't do it because it was a one-week commitment. Because you started rehearsing on a Monday and you performed through Sunday, and they weren't free the week that was needed to do it. So I said I would love to work with Melissa Errico. So she was doing a show at the York Theater, and afterwards she stayed on stage. Everyone stayed on stage to talk to friends, basically, not strangers. But I went up to her and I said, I heard you were interested in doing Sadie Thompson. And she said, oh, yes, I was. It's a shame I couldn't do it. And I said, well, how'd you like a chance to do the recording? And she said, oh, I would like that. She said, just call my agent. Well, her agent was the big guy at William Morris. You know, that in recent years, there's one guy who was big guy at William Morris.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, he's not going to, I plan on offering a very modest recompense, and this will look upon as an insult to offer somebody a big agent. This because
Melissa, are you saying Melissa looked on it as an insult?
No, the agent.
The agent. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Robbie Lance. Robbie Lance.
Mm.
So I said, I will not, because I had called agents, and instead of the person I wanted, they would say, I have somebody from Sesame Street. I said, no, I want a Broadway name. I do not want someone who played a frog or,
Yeah.
I offered $500, and the commission on that was not worth their time, and they wouldn't even ask a person if they would do it because the commission was too small.
Yeah.
So Donald Sadler
Yeah.
was friends with her, with Melissa.
Yeah.
So I got a telephone number for Donald. It's all about getting telephone numbers. I got a telephone number for Donald Sadler. And I said, I want to do, but I don't want to call the agent. Can you talk to Melissa? And he did, and she called me because she didn't care about what she was paid. Who was that? Is that you, Wes?
Yeah.
Are you showing me a picture there?
No, sorry.
No, suddenly saw a picture.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we did the recording, and she paid. She went to a place, and she dressed as Sadie Thompson. She had never done the role.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I will pay thousands of dollars, it turned out, to have herself photographed as Sadie Thompson. And that will be in the booklet. That's another thing I want. I was more than happy to have her do that. And a very sweet lady. And it's a wonderful recording. Well, I think we've gone over a lot of things, and I thank you very much for giving me this time, and we'll hopefully get this up on YouTube, and people will learn some of what has transpired in your life.
Okay, and will you give me the channel and the time, and so I'll know how to bring it up again?
Yes.
I'm very, very appreciative of this, Bruce. I'm very happy. Happy you asked me to do this, and love doing it.
Good. I will call you, and you'll get my information. You'll give me your information for exchanging things.
All right, and happy New Year to you, Bruce, to you and your family.
You too. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Bruce. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.